Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with R-CALF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, if you were to tell someone that ensuring a reliable, affordable, and safe food supply is one of the United States' most important roles, they'd probably ask you to tell them something that they don't already know. So what do we make of this urgent effort to transform America's food system? The president wants to rebuild America's food supply chains, and he's tasked his agriculture secretary to come up with a plan. So the secretary sent out a notice asking for comments on how best to transform our domestic food system in a way that strengthens domestic supply chains to make them more durable and resilient. And this includes the supply chains for cattle and for beef. So that's government speak, which doesn't explain why there's an urgent need to do this at all. It doesn't say this is an unprecedented effort, and it doesn't admit that things have gone so terribly wrong that there are now unprecedented numbers of private lawsuits and official congressional calls for investigations regarding the condition of the U.S. cattle market and the conduct of the biggest beef packers. So let's start there. Why is this transformation of domestic cattle and beef supply chains needed? Well, it's needed because together the two supply chains were incapable of withstanding the shock of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's needed because a competitive live cattle supply chain no longer exists. Yes, the supply chain is still there, but competition has been purged from all its important transaction points and segments. And we know this is true because cattle prices and beef prices have been trending in opposite directions for years, even though the only ingredient in beef is cattle. This transformation is needed because actual events have demonstrated the current cattle and beef supply chains do not work to meet our food security needs, and because the outcome of these two inadequate supply chains is high prices for consumers and low prices for cattle producers. So what went wrong? After all, America once had reliable and dependable cattle and beef production and distribution supply chains. Well, what went wrong is that a few decades ago, the United States fundamentally changed course. Rather than support America's family farm system of agriculture and the high level of competition needed to keep it vibrant and viable, policymakers focused instead on a new goal, and the new goal was efficiency. So long as the loss of competition was replaced with something deemed to be efficient, efficiency won out every time. And that's what fueled what the USDA coined merger mania in the 1980s. Competition was systematically purged from throughout the cattle supply chain and replaced with largeness of scale, based on the misguided belief that large firms could do everything that competitive market forces could do, but they could do it even better because they were efficient. What was left was a highly concentrated beef packing industry. So once all the not large enough firms and businesses, farms and ranchers were pushed out, the United States made its second fundamental course change. The United States surrendered to the highly concentrated and now extremely powerful beef packing lobby that wanted access to cheaper input supply chains, which of course were in foreign countries. And that was the dawning of the globalization of input supply chains that began in the 1990s. Now, the globalization of input supply chains did and still does do exactly what its designers intended. It allows multinational beef packers to bypass domestic supply chains and instead source their inputs from lower production cost countries, as well as to use those lower cost imports to leverage down domestic input prices. And so it is that today's food crisis is merely a symptom of two fundamental changes in America's course that occurred decades ago and that have facilitated the concentration of the beef packing industry and the globalization of input supply chains. So how do we fix this? First, you don't fix something that is this systemically broken by making minor tweaks. You fix this by undoing all the past policy changes that ushered in both concentrated beef packers and globalized input supply chains. Now, if we don't do that, and if we don't do it fast, history may prove that this is a two-part change that America made that may be America's greatest and most consequential blunder. And that's because there will soon be too few cattle farmers and ranchers left in the industry to form the critical mass of producer numbers necessary to sustain a truly competitive marketplace. So we have our work cut out for us. And please go to our website at r-cafusa.com to get more information and to become a supporting member so that together we can restore the lost competition in your U.S. cattle markets. With that, have a productive week. Thank you and goodbye.